All right, welcome to the AmberLeaf sponsored webinar, How to Build Recurring Revenue in a Membership Economy, and author Q&A with Robbie Baxter. Robbie, good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
It's nice to see you again. I know we're probably only about 5 miles away from each other, but I think we're both in home offices. So nice to see you again. I've always enjoyed our conversations. I'm looking forward to this one. But by way of introduction, for those who don't know you as I do, I wanted to just say a few things about you, and feel free to chime in and extend if I miss anything. But not only are you the author of a great book called The Membership Economy, but also a strategy consultant on the membership economy, helping clients like Netflix, SurveyMonkey, Yahoo. Let's see if I can remember any others. Certainly a handful of startups and venture-backed companies. Earlier in your career, Booz Allen strategy consultant, as I recall, and what was it? A fellow for New York City Urban Fellow.
100 years ago.
It all counts.
Yeah.
All counts. Right? Hard.
Yeah, but more recently, more work with associations and financial services firms and software and media companies. But yes, I did start my career working for the city of New York, which I'm very proud of.
And support quoted in the New York Times, Consumer Reports, Wall Street Journal, and a variety of others. And I know that you have done extensive speaking on the speaking circuit, as well as the strategy consultant. So thank you for joining us. It's a topic that is kind of near and dear to what we do here at AmberLeaf, because as a customer experience consultancy, we kind of focus on anything that touches the customer and all the data and business processes and models that support that. So from marketing to sales to service and all the data governance to create, air quotes, good data. It's what we do. But the shift that our clients are making is one from a one and done sale into the how do I get this recurring revenue that lasts forever, that forever customer. So when we were introduced, which was about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, I guess now, and I'm not sure if you even remember. Do you remember how we met?
I think through your brother.
Through my brother, that's right. And I'm like, I already know this woman. And you know who it was that I knew? It was your sister.
Keep it in the family, right?
Your sister. So anyway, it's great to get to know you and have a chance to chat a little bit today. And hopefully we can share some of your experiences for the audience on how to go about creating that recurring revenue channel. So maybe before I monopolize the time here, just a little housekeeping. We'll go for about 40 minutes. There is a Q&A box for anyone that wants to ask a question. There's a chat box and a poll box and a Q&A box. You got to hit the Q&A box, and we'll go ahead and get the questions through that way, and we'll go ahead and ask them. We'll keep it interactive. People can ask at any time. But I do have a few kind of lined up on my own. So why don't we start with, what is this membership economy that you're talking about?
Yeah, the membership economy is a massive transformational trend that I first started noticing about 15 years ago when I was doing consulting work with Netflix. And I started getting calls from all kinds of organizations that wanted to be the Netflix of their industry. And what I saw was a move from ownership to access, from transactional to recurring revenue-based business models, from anonymous to known relationships between companies and their customers, and a focus on the long term as opposed to the short-term revenue goals. And I saw this over and over again in different industries. And so I called that trend the membership economy, because at the heart of all of these organizations is a membership mindset, a focus on the forever transaction as being more important than any kind of short-term benefit.
And I recall that you were helping Netflix back in 2003, before they even came into streaming. Is that right? So one of the pioneers. Yeah. Maybe you could share an example or some of the where they were at the time and how revolutionary what they was doing.
Yeah, what was really interesting to me about Netflix at that time is that even though this was 3 DVDs out at a time, and they were already doing something revolutionary, which was to provide members with the most efficient and comfortable way of getting access to professionally created video content with cost certainty. And each one of those pieces was really important. The efficiency, the widest selection of professionally created video content, and cost certainty, meaning, no late fees, no extra fees. And over the years, as you pointed out, that was even before streaming, even before House of Cards, even before they became a real leader in the world of content creation. They just keep doing the right thing for the customers to make good on their forever promise. And, what Netflix will look like in 10 years will probably be totally different than what they look like today, which is totally different than what they looked like, 15 years ago when I was doing that work with them.
It looks like I've once again drawn on the screen somehow, and I'm not exactly sure how I did it. So
okay.
we'll see how long these
we'll print it out, put it on our refrigerator.
I'm not sure how I did that. But one of the things that I've noticed as a trend is that companies that are starting have this advantage of being able to kind of start with membership and subscription and a community aspect all as part of their offer from birth. But there's just a ton of businesses out there, many of them are clients at AmberLeaf, that need to make or want to make a transition into this recurring revenue. And that to me seems to be a trickier problem to tackle. And I'm wondering if you could share some stories or examples maybe of, we've got folks on the line here today, financial services companies. So a product that is kind of similar to a recurring revenue product, but maybe without the membership, although credit unions will probably say they do. We've got some associations online. I see a healthcare online, a hospitality is online as well. So maybe if we could start with, this one and done approach, what is the best way to start to move towards this recurring revenue? Where do you look?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, your point that it's harder if you're a going concern, I would say that if you're a startup, you might disagree, and you might say at least the larger companies, the companies that you mentioned that are on the line, at least they have customers, right? At least they have a product that people want. So it's not necessarily harder, but what is challenging is making a change, because if you already have people on the boat, it's harder to turn the boat because you don't want to lose anything. And that's the biggest issues with larger organizations. When you say, hey, we want to move to a membership model, we want to incorporate subscription pricing into our strategy, there's always a question about what are we going to be giving up? What are we risking? So that's kind of the first challenge with larger companies that are moving to a membership mindset. The other thing is that many of these companies, because they have such a short-term focus on revenue, it can be really scary to say, let's trust that if we provide ongoing value, we'll get ongoing payments. There's sort of this fear, like, what if we get found out? What if our products aren't good enough and people cancel? So what I would say to organizations that are thinking about moving to subscription pricing or moving to a membership mindset is to start by taking a step back and thinking about what is the value that you provide that brings your customers to you in the first place. And then taking that value proposition and saying, how could we solve that problem more fully and forever for them? So for example, people go to Blockbuster or used to go to Blockbuster to get a movie. But really what we wanted is we wanted access to video content when we didn't, in the easiest way possible, meaning it was too hard to go to the movie theater, so we went to Blockbuster. Even easier is getting the movies delivered to your house so you don't have to leave. Even easier is streaming them. Even easier, is having them come right through, the cable service that you're already getting, or right through your phone or your computer. So it's really about kind of opening up your mind and taking a step back and saying, if we were really solving this problem for our customers, what would we do? And one great tactic that I recommend to organizations is take your value proposition, your mission, and say, what if somebody, our best person from our company left, found a great technologist and somebody with deep pockets and said, we're going to go after the old company. What would they do if they were unencumbered by legacy systems and legacy relationships? And that's really where you start to get creative and find new ways of serving the same people better.
Got it. So as you go about crafting the offer, are there any specific characteristics that you help clients to look for? And maybe I'll drop one that I kind of like is anything where the offer that we provide not only makes the member stronger, but the fact that there's multiple members involved makes the whole offering stronger. And I know LinkedIn was an example of that, and you and I have spoken about that recently. I'm wondering if you could share maybe an example like that, or any other examples where they actually use the member-to-member, the community aspect, to strengthen the offer itself and the value that goes into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So pretty much you're talking about a network, what people call a network effect, meaning that each new member that joins creates more value for the people who are already paying. So yeah, LinkedIn is a great example, right? The people who pay would not be paying if all the other people weren't already there. That is what the people themselves, our content that we create is the value. You can also see it, there's a network effect in, pretty much any online community. Professional associations have a network effect as well. Right? Because, let's take the AICPA, which is an organization I've done some work with. Young CPAs, when they join accounting firms, often their partner takes them to their first AICPA meeting and says, hey, you know what? We volunteer here. We contribute. This is how we give back and how we demonstrate leadership and commitment to our profession. And so it's that network effect, it's the people participating that's really creating the lion's share of the value.
I see. And as it relates to kind of crafting the offer, I want to move from, hey, the first step for a lot of these companies is, okay, what is the offer that we're going to create, right? And how do we create enough value that the customers will stay forever and we won't end up cannibalizing an offer? So I want to kind of stay on craft the offer for a minute, but then I want to move back to, okay, if we've got an offer, what are some of the metrics, and how's the best way to price that? How's the best way to make sure that you're retaining or preventing churn, and kind of look at some of those metrics and working our way back up through the funnel, because it seems like the focus is always on acquiring new members and new customers, where that may or may not be the low-hanging fruit. So, but while we're on crafting the offer, you told a story once about Great America and how they went about turning this kind of one-and-done transaction into a season pass. I wonder if you could maybe tell us a little bit about how they went about taking this one-time purchase and turning it into something that's of greater value to the client, and the types of businesses that works for.
Yeah, absolutely. So amusement parks in general, and also places that people go once but might go more often. Another example is the car washes. I just spoke at the International Car Wash Association, which, who knew there was such a thing, and so many, car washes and machinery and equipment and all of that. And what they share is that, if you offer an unlimited membership, people come more frequently. They have a higher total spend because the organization. So here's how you think about it. Let's go back to the Great America example. They have really, really high fixed costs and relatively low variable costs, meaning that whether or not anybody comes to the amusement park, they have to spend a lot of money to staff it, and they have to spend a lot of money on the equipment. So each additional person that comes is mostly profit for them. Not only that, but when I come, I'm probably going to buy some food. I might pay to play some games of chance or games of skill. I might buy some souvenirs for my kids. So there's additional revenue to be made. And so what they did is they really thought about what is the price at which it almost seems like a no-brainer for people to become members, which is usually, and this is true of many amusement parks and also nail salons and also car washes. It's usually somewhere between 2 and 3 times the single price of admission. That people kind of think, well, if I come once a season, or once a month, I'll come 3 times. That seems like a good deal. And so that's how it's priced. And then people have unlimited access. And so it changes how people think about using the offering. And it also creates opportunities for additional sales because you're building a stronger relationship and a more frequent cadence of engagement. Because customer engagement is so important in building long-term relationships with the people you serve. Interesting.
So you touched on this pricing and this 2 to 3 times on a visit or an occurrence. We see a lot of clients that are entering subscriptions as in terms of, hey, here's a freemium way into an offer. Certainly out here in Silicon Valley and the software clients that we have, they all have kind of a try and buy or a freemium model where they try to move people up the scale. Anything from a best practices or pitfalls that you've learned as it relates to freemium and converting freemium into an actual paying, and where to draw the line on value? Because I imagine, certainly as a consumer, that it's super hard to swallow a price raise if you don't get it right.
Yeah. Price increases are always tricky in any business, but they're especially tricky when you have subscription pricing, because the whole idea of subscriptions and membership is that people take off their consumer hat where they're looking at alternatives and they put on a member hat and say, you know what, I trust this organization. I'm going to pay this rate. I've decided that that's fair and I'm going to pay it forever. And I'm not going to worry about it anymore unless something really bad happens or something really significant changes in my life. So once they're locked in, they're not thinking about it. And if you raise the price, they're going to go back and reconsider the decision. And whenever somebody reconsiders a purchase decision, you risk losing them. Mm-hmm. So that's the risk of raising your prices. Now, the risk of freemium is that a lot of organizations, and I've actually had clients come to me and say, we want freemium, put freemium into our business model. How do we do that? Mm-hmm. And I always ask them, like, what do you want freemium to do for you? And there's 3 big things that freemium can do for an organization. One of them is they can create a network effect. So back to the LinkedIn example, if all of us free members of LinkedIn weren't there, the people who would pay, the recruiters, the salespeople, the job seekers, they wouldn't pay if nobody was there. Right. So in that case, that network effect creates the value that people pay for. A second reason for freemium is if you have evidence that people need to change a habit before they commit to paying. So this is true when somebody says, I don't know if I'm going to do things this way, so I'm going to try it for a while. So for example, the New York Times, where you might say, I like reading the paper, or I don't really read online very much. But then when you hit 10 articles in a month, mm-hmm. then you have to upgrade. And so that's an example of changing behavior, from not reading the paper or from reading it in the physical format to going, to committing to online. And the third reason that you might use freemium is when the people that are using it are actually a marketing channel. So this is like the SurveyMonkey example. I might have a free subscription to SurveyMonkey. I might send a survey to you, Kevin, for free. And you're at a, customer experience company, you might actually say, we need this product, this SurveyMonkey product, to do our consulting work. So we're going to pay for it. In fact, I'm going to even buy an enterprise license for my whole company, right? Even though I, Robbie, am not paying anything, I'm the marketing channel. I brought in a big fish. Right. So it's worth freemium for me. I've earned my free subscription. There's lots of other cases where people come to me and they want freemium, and there's none of those 3 things make sense. And that's what's really interesting. So for example, a company that does online payroll, right? Free, people aren't thinking, I'm going to move to online payroll, but only if it's free. It's not the cost that prevents somebody from changing how they do payroll usually. It's the cost to change your activity. It's sticky the way they're already doing it. And it's the risk that the new way won't work very well. What if we change our systems and it doesn't work? That's the scary part. Mm-hmm. So a lot of like SaaS companies, for example, I would say, don't do freemium, because your problem is not that people want to try it for free. The problem is that people aren't sure it's worth switching. It's the time that's the big hurdle, not the dollars.
Right. Yeah. And I imagine there's also this perceived value as well. Like if it's free, how much value could there really be?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Especially with new things, especially like you think about the music industry, right? And what damage Napster did to people's perception of what music should be worth, right? It's taken a long time, and it's still like, what you pay for a single song on iTunes compared to the cost of an album, compared to how frequently or how rarely people buy albums now. And the majority of people now are getting their music from like a free subscription to a music streaming service. So that's totally changed.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I'm curious as to whether or not you're experiencing any best practices as it relates to the annual subscription versus, say, the monthly, and how that impacts the whole metrics of converting and the flow in and so on. Just while we're still on pricing, is there anything that kind of jumps out as we might say monthly, but we're always going to charge for a 1 or a 3-year subscription? What are you seeing there as far as the psychological games, and more so what's working?
Yeah, so it's always worth testing monthly versus annual, because different things happen in different organizations. So for example, some organizations, actually, it's different people that go for monthly than annual, because the people that are doing monthly are gaming the system. So think about if you have a body of content, right? And some people say, I'm going to come in for 1 month, I'm going to use all your content, and then I'm going to cancel, right? That is not behavior that you want to support. So you might want to price in such a way that that's not possible. So that might be charging for the first year and then it's monthly after that, or you might just charge annually because you don't care about losing those people who are gaming the system.
Yeah.
Another example is when something is seasonal. So I had a client where they had a service for sports streaming of content, and the season was 8 months. And the subscription was monthly. So you can guess what happened, right? People subscribed for 8 months, canceled, and then hopefully remembered to sign up again in January.
Right.
And lots of people forgot, and they didn't sign up again until February or March. So what we did is we left the monthly pricing in place, but we created an annual pricing option that was the same price as 8 months, and also included some other catalog content, evergreen content, movies, highlights from prior year, final matches. And so the idea there is that if you're actually committed to your sports team, the annual subscription's a no-brainer. Mm-hmm. So we want to move people to annual, but in some cases you want to keep the monthly if you think that there's a good reason that a customer that you would want the monthly flexibility or need it.
I see. Great. So I want to maybe take this kind of pricing and structure the offer. We talk about pricing. Let's now maybe move towards, okay, there's some key metrics here that need to be managed in the subscription and membership economy. And one is to make sure that the people are actually renewing, right? And that we're not putting folks in the top of the funnel and then having them through the leaky bucket, if you will. And
no leaky bucket.
No leaky bucket. So I want to maybe talk for a second about churn and retention. And do you look at these as kind of two sides of the same coin, or are these kind of different things? And are there different kinds of churn? And a loaded question, because I know what part of your answer is.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that excellent lead-in. So the first thing that I would say is that we should all have T-shirts that say "Make retention sexy again," because most companies don't pay enough attention to how they retain customers. And so if you're not doing that, if people aren't staying, you have a big problem, and that's a product market fit problem, and you need to figure that out before you invest in acquisition. You need to figure out how to make people stay. Otherwise, you're always going to lose money. You're always going to have a leaky bucket.
So let me pause there. Is it a product market fit, or is it a communication problem where the expectations of what marketing is set in the, out to generate the demand hasn't aligned with the offer?
Yeah, absolutely fair. So you want to figure that out. Is it a product problem or is it a communication problem? And, sometimes the problem, like I describe it as this. If your customer says, if you could sit next to your customer for 45 minutes and talk their ear off, and they were going to listen carefully as you explained all the benefits of your product, and answered all of their questions, sort of gave them a private sales pitch, and they were completely welcoming of it. At the end of that pitch, if they said, "Oh, I didn't understand that your product did all those wonderful things. Sign me up right away," then you had a communication problem. If they say, "Yeah, I understand what you offer and I don't want it," then you have a product market fit problem. So great point. And the thing that's really interesting about this is that if it's just a communication problem, that's a cheap problem to fix. Mm-hmm. If you have a product problem, that can be really expensive.
Right.
So you definitely want to make sure that it's whether it's a communications issue or a product issue. You also want to look, when you're thinking about churn, you want to look at passive versus active churn, mm-hmm. and you want to look at acceptable and unacceptable churn. So passive versus active churn. Passive churn is when I didn't intend to cancel, but something happened with my credit card or my information that canceled for me without me intending to. And then I got some notes reminding me like, "Hey, your credit card changed. We need your new credit card number." Or, "Hey, your credit card expired. We need the new one." And I just never get enough energy to go fix it. And then I say, "Oh, what the heck? I don't really need to resubscribe." That's passive, because if you hadn't had the problem with the credit card, the person wouldn't have canceled. So you absolutely, that's a very technical, tactical problem that you should fix. And there's lots of companies, lots of banks that already have solutions for managing passive churn. Then active churn is when somebody actually says, "I want to cancel." And in that category, there's acceptable churn, which is like, I belong to a gym and I move away. Right? If I live 3,000 miles away from the gym and I never come back home to my old home, there is no good reason for me to have a subscription. On the other hand, if I cancel because I'm tired of the aerobics classes, that's a problem. If you want to keep that person forever, you need to mix it up more. If I cancel because I've used up all the content, that's a problem. If I leave my bank because I've decided that the service isn't good and I've had a bad service experience, and so I take my money and my loans elsewhere, that's active churn, and that is not acceptable. Somebody in the organization is at fault, and that is what is leading the person to leave.
So we talk about churn because of a communication problem, churn because of a product issue, and then there's churn because of customer service problems, right?
Yeah.
So it's that entire experience from the minute there.
It's all, yes. It's everything about the experience, the product, the service, the pricing, the solution, the alternatives, right? Sometimes what happens is somebody has a random opportunity to look at an alternative, and they've been loyal, they've had their member hat on, and then suddenly they see another alternative. Maybe it's an advertisement that they see. Maybe they go to their friend's gym, to try a class with a friend, and they realize like, wow, I always thought I was getting a good deal here, but it turns out that I'm not getting a good deal. It turns out that this organization's not as good as what else is out there.
Yeah.
And that's really bad because, membership is based on trust. And part of that trust is that you, the company, or you, the association, are going to help them achieve their mission, and they don't need to look for alternatives. And if they find out that you're not doing the best job of helping them achieve their mission and that there's a better alternative out there, not only are they going to leave, but they're going to feel really betrayed. And they may talk about it and badmouth you because the closer you are to someone and the more you trust someone, this is true of people and organizations, the more angry you're going to feel if they take advantage of that trust.
Yeah. One of the things that we're seeing clients ask for is to try to get proactive about these churn and retention measures. And sometimes that's pretty easy to identify loyalty events. And then there are other times when we have to look at kind of the anti-event, like they haven't done anything. It's just inertia that's pulling them through and continuing. I'm curious what your experience has been as far as the tactic of proactively winning back or retaining a customer, say, versus the investment decision to acquire new ones, and how what your perspective is on that, number one, and then number two, how are marketers convincing or organizations convincing leadership to actually invest in that, because there's always a drive to fill the top of the funnel.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, retention is not sexy. I don't know why. But most companies, when they have their board meetings, they show new logos, year over year growth in customers. They don't show retention as the leading indicator. And that's really surprising to me, because retention, if you retain the same customers, it's so much more profitable. And the data shows that. So the first thing I would say to organizations, if you're trying to convince your leadership, is show them the numbers, show them the value of retaining one customer for longer versus what it brings to you to bring in a new customer in that same time frame. You have all these acquisition costs that you have to absorb. So I think that is probably the first thing. Second thing is that marketers increasingly are spending their marketing energy after the acquisition. The moment of transaction is the starting line for the relationship, not the finish line. It used to be the finish line, right? You walk into the store, you buy something and you leave, and that's the end. And then they go back and try to find a new person to buy something. Now that transaction is where you start building the relationship, and marketing should be encouraging engagement, should be encouraging, making sure that people have an understanding of what they're already paying for so that they get value for it, so that they don't cancel. By the time someone cancels, a lot of organizations have win-back programs. That when someone says, I'm going to cancel, or 30 days out and says, hey, we're going to ask you to re-up, re-up a month before the end of your year. But often by that time, it's too late. You want to be communicating across the whole term of the relationship, and you want to notice if behavior is changing. So you pointed out this inertia, right? Like I join, I'm really active for the first month, and then I stop using the offering. That's when you should intervene, not 30 days before renewal time.
Yeah. Maybe while we're on this churn and retention, I know that a lot of the clients a lot of the folks that we work with aren't necessarily selling digital products, and I'll put financial service in there as kind of a digital product, if you will, or an intangible. Okay. But I know we share a joint client. I'm not sure if we can actually name the name, or if you can or not, but it has to do with 3D printing. And I know that they're doing some very interesting things as it relates to customer service and usage of the product, and kind of proactively monitoring and predicting usage of the product and failures and so on. I'm curious to hear any examples you might have of clients, and if you're able to share this one, that would be awesome, of where they're taking a traditional offer, maybe it's a one and done physical product, and they're making the membership and subscription as part of the service to start. Because getting off a go for a lot of these companies is the number one thing, and services seems to be kind of a natural place to start that evolution. I'm curious what your experience is.
Yeah, so I think of this as kind of the membership of things, kind of like the Internet of Things. Okay. How can you, as an organization that is in manufacturing, how can you leverage new technology, things like telemetrics, to track usage, to build data insights, to be able to benchmark your customers against each other and provide learnings across your entire customer base? Those are the kinds of questions that manufacturers of physical products should be thinking about. And a couple of examples. One of them is, you talked about 3D printing. The idea of, instead of buying the printer outright, subscribing to it and having software in that printer that allows the parent company to analyze, derive insights, provide feedback and recommendations, and also to fix it when it's not optimized, it's not working at its optimal level, to recognize that kind of at the home office. You see that with Peloton bikes, which are my new obsession, where you buy the bike. This is a stationary bike that you buy for your home.
Can you see the one in my home office here?
Right behind us. Yeah. And it has a screen. And so you can actually subscribe to classes. And you can video chat with people that are riding at the same time as you. So again, back to your question about network effect. If I have a Peloton bike and, I'm riding at home, I want to have someone to ride with. So I reach out to my friends and say, hey, who else has a Peloton? Who wants to ride with me at, 7:00 on Tuesday morning and do, Robin's class? And we can kind of, encourage each other or compete. So, that's another example. What Tesla's doing with their cars, with the software in their cars. There's a lot of organizations now that are thinking about how can we build membership, create a forever transaction, solve the bigger problem, build relationships, learn from our customers by leveraging new technology and thinking from a member mindset.
Yeah, and that's something that we start to see over and over again is at AmberLeaf putting in an infrastructure that captures that data, the kind of the institutional memory of those members or customers, not only the attributes about them, but how they're interacting. So then we can lay on top with the more sophisticated and further down the maturity, further up the maturity cycle, is to actually start to predict these things. And there's a variety of new technologies out there that do a great job of generating the propensity to act on something, be it converts through the funnel, be it to churn, and then going so far as to say, how do we prescribe a way to actually prevent them? Because it's one thing to have a prediction of who, a rank order of who's likely to churn. Maybe it's because of inactivity or because of a complaint to customer service. It's quite another to have the script and the playbook for how do we prevent that churn. So those are the kind of systems and tools that we've started to see more and more customers kind of hit that point in the maturity spectrum to start to implement. I'm wondering if that's what you're seeing as well. Or are they still at the very beginning of the creating of the offer?
I think in the membership of things, I think that these companies are a little bit behind, the software companies that we've been talking about and the content companies we've been talking about, but they're dealing with the same questions. You have to understand the customer journey. You have to understand what are the indicators that someone's going to be a super user, that someone's going to be a loyal member, that they're making your offerings part of their habits. And how do we encourage people to do the behaviors that will result in that habit formation? And what do we do when they are not forming those habits?
Right.
What are the underlying reasons that might be driving it? And what can we do to fix those? And it's not just about retention. It's also about optimizing the member experience so they get the most value from what they're paying for. If you focus on that, the retention will come more naturally.
Right. I'm going to sort of hit pause here and remind the audience that's listening live that they are able to ask a question if they hit the Q&A tab. I know there's a chat tab and a Q&A
I see
tab.
some questions.
Hit the Q&A tab. I've had a couple of comments roll in that I've tried to work into the questions to you. And let's see here. I've got one here. Any tips for helping change senior leadership's views to be longer-term view versus short-term demand generation? It sounds like coming from a marketer.
Yeah, so this is really hard. And the truth, this is my honest opinion. If you can show them with data. You can say, look, we have a problem. We're on the quarterly hamster wheel. It's stressful for everybody. Look, if we can invest in long-term, look at how longer-term our growth will change. Look at how our ROI will change. Look at how our lines will smooth out so that we can invest more thoughtfully. So you can make that kind of logical argument, data-driven argument to leadership. And in a lot of cases, they'll understand that and they'll want that. I find that a lot of CEOs are realizing that that membership, subscription, recurring revenue has to be part of the strategy. So if that's the case, then you have a much easier time selling leadership on it. You can try to share this is what other organizations are doing. And in my book, I have a lot of examples of different kinds of companies across different industries that are moving toward this longer term focus. But what I would really say is if your leadership is just super short term focused, there was one company I worked with that I'm not going to name where their whole strategy was how can we push the envelope as hard as possible to sell more stuff without breaking the law, right? Mm-hmm. So they were, and that's a company I didn't want to work with. I ended up not working with them because they didn't have a long-term mindset. They had a get in while the getting's good, get as much money as you can, and then move on. Mm-hmm. And if there's a leader like that, I might even, I'd say it's going to be a hard sell to change their mindset, and you might look at other organizations. And for those of you who are looking for jobs, look for leadership that has a long-term focus, because those are the companies that are going to thrive in the long term and where you're going to be able to have, a better career and have better results that you can demonstrate for, the time that you spend there.
Mm-hmm. So another question coming in, are you hearing any backlash about yet another monthly subscription, fatigue in this type of fatigue for the offers that haven't figured out the value equation. So maybe I can actually try to read that. Are you hearing any backlash?
Yes. Subscription fatigue and subscription guilt. I think both of those are very real things. So subscription fatigue, which you brought up, is this feeling of like, oh my God, there's so many subscriptions. I have to subscribe to everything and I can't possibly get all the value that I'm paying for with my subscriptions. And it's exhausting to even keep track of it. There's a new app that actually is designed to help you manage your subscriptions, so you know when the months come to an end, so you know when to cancel. Because people are like, I don't even know what I'm subscribing to anymore. I'm being forced to subscribe, to get these products that I don't really want to subscribe to, all of that. The other piece is subscription guilt, which is when you're optimistic. It's your optimism that gets you to subscribe because you think you're going to get all this value, and then you can't keep up with the value. So this might be subscription boxes, the Stitch Fix or Bark Box or any number, Pop Sugar, any number of boxes that are usually about discovery of new products in a category you care about, and then they start stacking up. And then when you look at the stack of products that you haven't been able to try or use yet, and then the new one comes, you start to feel guilty. Mm-hmm. I had a friend who was subscribing to one of the meal kit prep subscriptions, and it was a Sunday afternoon, and we were having a pool party, and he came over. We knew his family had just left to go out of town for vacation, but he was home to work Sunday night, and he said, we said, why don't you stay and have a burger with us? And he said, I can't, because I promised my wife that I would use the meal kit in the fridge that we didn't use on Friday. It's going to expire and we're going to waste it. So clearly there's no money loss here. It's not a financial decision because he's going to get a free meal at our house. We're not going to charge him for the burger. Right. So it's purely about the guilt of those almost expired ingredients in his fridge that make him feel so guilty that he skips the party, or maybe he didn't want to go to our party, but he goes home early from the party because he has to use the subscription.
Right. So is that an offer crafting issue, or just how do you go about addressing something like that?
I think that's a product market fit. I think a lot of the discovery, so taking apart between the meal kits and the subscription boxes, anything that's about discovery, right? That's about discovery, or all you can eat, could be overwhelming to people. And depending on how you price it, it could feel like, instead of feeling like all you can eat, what a great deal, it feels like I have to pay this huge amount, even though I'm not very hungry. So that's a product market fit. It's like when you go to a restaurant and it's a buffet and you have kids with you that are only going to eat 3 chicken nuggets. And you're like, really, I have to pay $26?
Yeah.
And there's no choice. Like that's a product market fit. If people are coming in with their kids who need a snack and you don't have a snack, or if it's the fatigue problem where I can't keep up with the value that's being offered to me, and then I start to feel bad. So yeah, that's a product market fit issue.
I think that you've just kind of hit on maybe a topic for our next conversation, which is tiering the offers. Because it sounds like that's a perfect opportunity, an example of creating an offer to meet a particular segment of your customers. When we touched on the monthly versus the annual customers, there were those that were kind of not your best customers, were kind of gaming the system, but there is probably an offer for them if you choose to go after them. So maybe we can park that because we're at 46 minutes right now. I don't see any more questions rolling in, but maybe while I'm wrapping it up, I'll just remind people again, you can hit the Q&A tab and ask questions. You can only do that online. Sorry for the folks that have dialed in. It's a listen-only mode on the dial-in, but if there are any last questions while I'm closing it up here, just a quick recap on what we've heard. We heard a little bit about what is the membership economy. Thank you for sharing that. How that's disrupting many industries. The characteristics of it and some best practices regarding pricing, some of the metrics around churn and retention. We've talked a little bit about the fact that some predictive analytics and some machine learning can be used to get in front of that and actually prescribe methods to retain customers, which is a way of boosting. And then there are some challenges. You still have to have leadership's commitment, and churn has never been considered all that sexy. So maybe there's something there for our next conversation. We talk a little bit more about some of those topics. But the book is called The Membership Economy: Find Your Super Users, Master the Forever Transaction, and Build Recurring Revenue. Robbie Kellman-Baxter, thank you very much for joining us today. And I will follow this up. I know there's a couple of handouts. The book is available on Amazon, and your website, I believe, is membershipeconomy.com.
Yeah, or peninsulastrategies.com, either one.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for your time today, Robbie, and thank everyone for joining us. Have a great day.